We are on the continuing capital improvements projects for the county offices.
This is DSS, and the board asked for to include all the departments in the Guinness building, which are building inspections and planning and zoning. So this is a revised rendering of what that site might look like over off of Calvin Hill Drive. This would be DSS, and this is the section that would be added for, potentially added for building inspections and planning and zoning and board. Move on. Next slide. What Architectural Partners did here was to include some consideration of future expansion or future parking spaces on the site. And they did
Keep both working.
it's not working. So advance forward up backwards. So this is just the initial, floor plan. This would be subject to refinement for more spaces. One of the things that was asked is, and this would still be subject to, the design process, is the DSS facility does include offices for office staff, shared spaces, etc. And this, I haven't studied this part as much, but I know the building official Chuck Miller will share that information, this information with both he and Doug Bishop, the Director of Planning and Zoning. Chuck had some comments early this morning, which I really didn't get a chance to review, but I think there's suggestion for additional square footage and some realignment of the space over here. But as again, if the board decides to go forward with this, that would all be sort of flushed out with the final design. Let's see. And there's two different scopes. One is about 9,100 square feet and about 9,600 square feet. And again, if the board decides to go forward with this, the architects would meet with both departments and again, finalize floor plans, layouts, etc., and final cost estimates. And I'll try to rotate that around. I think the board has this in their package, but their cost estimates for both options, their preliminary cost estimates, of course, everything is subject to final design and bidding, of course. But for the smaller footprint, it's $3,126,600. For the larger, it's about another 100,000 or so, $3,243,600. And there's a full scope of the work that would be accomplished. So, any questions the board has about any of this? I'll note that in a discussion with Architectural Partners and Hertford Project this morning about this project, one thing that I reminded or related to Architectural Partners is it's been probably 20 years ago, but at some point after the Food Line shopping center was put in place, we had, through Massey Saunders, who's board knows, local engineer and surveyor, worked with Hurt and Profit to do geotechnical analysis of the overall site here, which is about 70 acres, and this is just a part of the overall site. So we've asked Architectural Partners to pull that geotechnical report, because one of the concerns with, and I apologize, I have reported this briefly, but the site is the bedrock is potentially right under the surface of the ground and throughout the site. With the Food Line site, when I first came to work for the county, the first day I was here, the interim county administrator at that point took me over to this site, and it's still there. There's a huge rock pile that was put over onto county or EDA property by the general contractor who constructed the food line project. And what they were doing was blasting bedrock out of that site to construct it, and they were moving it over on the county property. And we put a stop to that pretty quickly, but the damage was sort of done. So that bedrock, or that rubble, which is sort of concealed by vegetative growth now, is still there. County staff cleared the site last summer or last spring. We do think that there's an area where this could go without any issues, but that's still subject to final determination. So, subject to what the board would want to do, we could proceed. They're going to, Kurt Profit and AP are going to look at that geotechnical report because Mr. Saunders said he would assure he still had it, and Kurt Profit should have too, just to ensure that it's not going to be a problem. But if the board wants to proceed with this, we would work with, well, it's sort of we have a catch-22 in the Public Procurement Act. The state code has limitations on how much work a consultant firm, architect or here can perform in a given year. So there's two options for the board's consideration if you want to move forward with this. One is to certify, since we've previously done an RFP and interviewed architectural firms for multiple projects for the county, you can certify that it's in the county's best interest to work with architectural partners. The other option is we have to issue another RFP and go back out and solicit architectural services again. So not necessarily a hurdle, but depending on what you decide, we could extend out the timeline to go forward with this. And we talked to Davenport, we being county staff, Mr. Gary was 5 and 9, with Roland Cooch of Davenport, and Paul Jacobson, Sanchez, and Mark Miller, who's the county's development council, about how to finance this. And we're not going to meet, for example, Virginia Resource Authority's spring pool program. If the board wanted to proceed with this pretty expeditiously, it's quite possible we could do the summer pool. That seemed to be the direction that Davenport was suggesting that this project be considered for. And I'll share other information about another project when the board's in closed session. But so sort of what questions the board has and what do you want to do next? If I've been insightful enough in explaining this. About $3 million. Don't want to certainly overstate this, but the board may recall the presentations by Mr. Cooch in your fiscal capacity. So it's not beyond the realm of your fiscal capacity to do this. It's sort of subject to what else you want to do.
Is there any reason not to move forward?
I don't think so. I think the only potential issue is whether or not, once they pull this geotechnical report from 20-some years ago, if there's any consideration that the site's not going to work. I mean, it can work. You can make it work, but it might be more expensive.
Yeah. Can you go back to the slide where it shows the cost comparison to beginners and a little bit sideways?
Yeah, sideways. I don't think I can rotate it. I mean, I'll defer her. She can find it on the computer, laptop. It's about a couple $100,000 more.
But in reality, that's going to be a better long-term solution, and then we can potentially encourage McGinnis to be something for the community. Whether that's a new business or
more space is usually always better.
Right. Sure. I think,
and depending on the actual design, working with DSS and billing and zoning, it may be we recommend a larger footprint.
Right.
This is what they've conceived to date based on information that we provided to them.
So just a couple $100,000 more, I think that's a reasonable move forward. Gives planning and zoning, is that okay with you, Dylan? Do you like that idea?
Sure.
What is the board's thoughts?
I'm just curious, Ms. Rose is here from the
Oh,
Department
sure.
of Social Services. I'm just wondering if you have any, words of encouragement for us.
Can you come forward, Ms. Rose? Can you just come forward real quick? It'll be easier.
Want to make sure that this is something that's going to work for the Department of Social Services and, you know, whatever thoughts you might have.
I think it'll work for the Department of Social Services, not only for us, is that we be involved in the process of specific needs to DSS.
Oh, of course.
Other than that, I think it will work.
Great. Just want to make sure you're part of the, obviously, you have to be part of the process. So.
Thank you.
But getting you out of those units down there is already a big improvement.
Please, thank you, I appreciate it.
Great. What action, do we have to make another action with social services in this, or just make a motion to include the building and planning and zoning?
You could wait if you want to. I'm not encouraging you to wait, of course, the board to wait, but there's a planned continuing meeting on the 16th, and we could report back on the geotechnical analysis if you just want to know that before you make a final decision.
I mean, we're already moving forward with social services, correct?
But this is as far as we've gone.
Oh, this is the design. You know, I think we're going to move forward kind of no matter what, in my mind. What is the board's thoughts?
Yes.
Mr. Harvey? Mr. Farr? Can we get a motion to include planning and zoning in the design?
So the motion would like, if I may,
Yeah.
likely authorize staff to, well, we'll need to bring, if you're comfortable with this, a resolution backs the board sort of attesting to no need to issue another RFP. We just work with potential partners. It's in the best interest of the county to do so. If you're not comfortable with that, we don't need to issue another RFP. Most likely.
I don't think anybody has any issues with our partners.
I move that we proceed with the Nelson County DSS and inspection planning concept 4 as presented.
What, is it like to comment on that?
Yeah.
So would it be to move to design, construction, et cetera?
Yes.
To construction facility.
Yeah.
All right, we want them to have their Christmas party in this new building.
Our New Year's. All right, that's a motion. We need a second. Second, Mr. Barton. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Spivey?
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton? Mr. Farr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Great. We've accomplished a lot. Let's move on to the item A, request for compensation increase. Okay, thank you. Request for compensation increase for Nelson County Service Authority Board of Directors. First and foremost, why do they need to ask permission from us to increase their pay $20?
Board passed a resolution previously that says that you decide those things by resolution.
Huh.
For who? We decide those things by resolution for who?
It's a long list.
Oh, we have a long list of things that we set the pay on.
Boards and committees.
Boards and commissions.
It's like planning commission, that makes sense.
They've always been the same pay we got. They have not been moved since last time we got that. So that's under discussion.
I mean, you know, it's going up from $75, I think, to $100. It's not that dramatic. We're talking a negligible cost change.
Yeah. It's paid from their own resources.
It's paid from their own resources. It's not going to impact the taxpayer. We're just allowing them to pay for it.
You may need to change the process.
Yeah. How boards and we set those things. All right.
You need a motion, we approve it for now, but there's a resolution that authorizes it.
R 2022-10.
Someone make a motion for that resolution.
Mr. Harvey moves that we approve R 2022-10 as presented. Second, Mr. Reed. Discussion.
Yes.
Mr. Parr.
I'm just curious. I mean, it seems like we're pulling one out. So can somebody explain to me why we're not addressing all? I mean, what's the reason for this request, I guess, is what I'm asking.
So your chairman, currently, on his exit, I looked at the board and I said, wow, you guys are only getting $75 a week for this. Some of the meetings can be pretty egregiously long and require a lot of individual attention. I would argue that it needs, I made the argument that $25 increase a month wasn't substantial. And if we need to look at like services or whatever else, that was just a discussion. I wasn't aware that we set it for a lot of other boards. I knew some like planning commission, I knew, I guess, others, but, as Mr. Harvey mentioned, maybe we also need to look at how we address those ones as well. 'Cause I'm sure we have to increase them forever.
Just so you know, this request came directly from the board of directors of the Department of Social Services. That's why it's coming up as one and not as.
Yeah.
We only received one request, this one, none of us has asked for adjustments.
Right.
We can bring the list back.
I think that'd probably be good, probably.
Is that something we can review during budget?
Of course, that would be good time.
I'm opposed to select picking, cherry picking who we look at. If we, as a board, agree we're gonna look at everybody, then sure, we'll look at,
Fine.
The budget time would be appropriate for that.
We can do that.
We don't actually cherry pick that.
They asked.
Board asked for it, we'll approve.
yeah, I get it. But
And we should also encourage we should look at the list too, this budget session.
We need to schedule the list ASAP and we study it.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second, we are in discussion. Mr. Parr, is there anything else to discuss? Nothing else further to discuss. Let's go on to the vote. Ms. Spivey?
Mr. Harvey,
Yes.
Mr. Barton,
Yes.
Mr. Parr,
yes,
Ms. Reed.
Yes.
Ms. Rutherford.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Moving forward, comprehensive plan, contract, scope of work. Ms. Carter, sorry.
That's right. So we have a resolution for the board to consider approval of to obtain the Berkeley group out of Bridgewater, Virginia to provide services for the update of the county's comprehensive plan and thereafter zoning and some division ordinances, or at least recommendations to the board. It's a multi-year process. What we scoped out provides for annual budgetary allocations for the completion of the project. There's a schedule of work in there. There's a draw schedule. We did include in the board's package today the request for proposals that will become a part of the contract. We just try to show you what they'll do, when they'll do it, and the timeline, how they'll draw money from the county. So just to refresh the board's memory, we issued a request for proposal some time ago for these services. We received 3 responses. 2 firms were interviewed. Hill Studio, the Berkeley Group, and the recommendation of the committee was to retain the Berkeley Group. So staff is ready to proceed with the board's approval and sign the contract and get the work that's most entirely of this work.
Dylan, do you have any comments?
I do not.
Move forward.
I have questions.
Questions, Mr. Barton?
How do you decide on this group to do this work?
So the selection committee interviewed 2 firms, and they chose the Berkeley group. Primarily, I think, and Mr. Reed and Mr. Rutherford can speak to this maybe as well because they were on the committee as well. But the Berkeley group offers the county some level of ownership over the plan. So we'll be working jointly together, co-authoring the plan as opposed to having a consultant write it for us.
Do you feel comfortable with this organization?
Absolutely. They're entirely made up of rural planners. They have a lot of rural experience. Everyone that's worked there has previously worked in local government before and are all familiar with comp plan process, zoning and subdivision ordinances. So we felt confident that they would do a good job with Nelson County specifically.
What study was that we did that It was our study, but they owned the information.
Yeah, over time, we fixed that problem.
Okay. You know, I thought that was very,
I think that's been a long time.
Any other questions for staff? It's the chair's recommendation that we approve R 2022-11.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt, Resolution 22-11 of the County Board of Supervisors authorization to contract services for the comprehensive plan update and recommendations of the subdivision. Yes.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yes. Excellent. Moving on to reports, county administrator's report.
We've agreed, tracking COVID-19 data. As of February 4th, 12 new cases in the county, 7-day average of 15 new cases. The trend line based on the Department of Health's data shows we spiked up considerably over several days the last few weeks, but the trend now looks like it's starting to decline, so that's very positive. Acute cases year to date as of the 4th of February, 2,497. Hospitalizations 70, deaths 25. Unfortunately, the death total is pretty much stayed where a couple more since several months ago. And I added this, the county's percent of fully vaccinated adults for the Department of Health staff is 80.4, with 45%, this is for adults, have had the booster vaccination. So, general reassessment, the 5 individuals the board's proposed to compose the Board of Equalization have completed their training and sent a letter to the circuit court to have them appointed. And we're just waiting for that, if it hasn't taken place, to occur so that we can have the first organizational meeting of the Board of Equalization and get their work to commence. FY22-23 budget. Mr. Gary has, and her staff, and departments, everybody, of course, has. We've compiled a very rough first draft that's balanced, but we still have a lot more work to do before it's presented to the board. So we'll try to get there as quickly as possible, of course. Planning, just real briefly, staff working with PDOT and the Thomas Jefferson PDC staff on transportation related initiatives, smart scale, proposed urban development area or areas, work that's in process. Dylan can probably describe those things better than I at this point. Piney River Water and Sewer.
I had a question back on B. From your experience with reassessments, have the complaints been less than normal, more than normal, abnormal?
I haven't studied the assessor's hearings. They adjusted just over $15 million of value. How many do you think inquiries have we gotten for the Board of Equalization?
Probably a dozen or more.
A dozen. So to be determined, we have to advertise their hearings and
Doesn't sound like too many.
well, yeah, maybe not. I don't think historically we've had hundreds of people, but certainly people do come out. They haven't got the tax bill.
What? Yeah,
That's right. It's usually after the fact. Yeah, I've been working on this Yusenko pump station forever, and one of the things that hopefully just got corrected today is one of the 2 primary pumps wasn't functioning, and we pulled that pump and we sent it for evaluation. Really, nothing was wrong with the pump. So, county staff, authority staff, and water and sewer company from Lynchburg in the process, probably as we speak, putting that pump back in service and hopefully starting it back up. And once that's done successfully, we ordered some parts for a valve that needs to be. That pump station is, pump station, Pine River System wastewater will be pretty much fully restored back to service. And when we get this valve refurbished, we'll be back at 100%. So, we've been working on this for months and months. We're finally hopefully rounded the corner there. And I did the board in the meeting report with Red for the center which we discussed earlier. So I really have nothing else to add about that.
Okay.
Any questions from you?
Any questions for Mr. Carter at this time? Hearing none, moving on to board reports. Mr. Barton?
No.
No reports. Mr. Harvey?
No.
Hearing none. Mr. Reed?
Yes. Back in November, we received, all the board members received an alert from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission about the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which had to do with the supplementary environmental impact statement on the restoration of the pipeline. One of the things it said in there is that FERC didn't have the authority in that document to easements on over 100 properties and across the entire. Now, those easements limit the development and the activity on the property. So, and many property owners have contacted Federal Energy Regulatory and ACP and Dominion about the process that they go through to try to get the easements back and get back full ownership. They've been unsuccessful so far. Each agency says it's the other person's responsibility. ACP says that it would reach out individually. They have not done that. So as of this moment, there doesn't appear to be where people can get their easements back. There's some technicalities to it that I won't go into, but what it does mean for our county is that a corridor going across our county, including temporary easements and easements that were been for construction, so which would have been for access to those to the pipeline route, that property owners can't develop or build across. Sales of properties have not gone through. Things that they would like to do, but like to build on those properties, they can't because of that. So, is how did that affect the assessments on those properties for taxes? And update on that.
No further update than what I've already been out to.
Okay. But it appears from the property owners that have spoken to me that that it was not something that was considered in the assessments because their assessments all went up. So whether they're getting assessments that don't reflect limitations of those put on the property, or if they have, then what happens? It's not a good scenario. Of course, the property owners are still hanging in limbo about this. So I wanted to bring this up just to inform you all. The issue was, and the other thing that I'm doing is I've talked to Susan Rohr and GIS. She did work for me, for us, that would inform us, just how many properties and so they were being affected by this. So we would have that information. Don't know valuable for any endpoint at this point for us to have and good for us to know in terms of what set values are going to be on those properties and how it affects the county.
Great.
So, if an out is coming, and we can look at this later if the board wants it to, but this property owner certainly, if they're concern should appear before the organization, take a look at it. But the board, and I think you all know this, of course, you can't change, the board can't change any assessments. Only the Board of Equalization or the commission. So that's sort of where it stands.
All right. Yeah. Is that Mr. Reed?
Thank you.
All right, TJPDC, very active in the regional housing partnership and trying to plan a fall forum. And so we're trying to see if we have any major developments that I can think of, not as of late. Have some new members going on with that. Broadband Authority met obviously last month. Looking forward to more universal connections. I heard of some folks recently getting access to broadband out in back into some Fauver area, headed towards Schuyler. So looking forward to Schuyler getting some fiber here soon. Planning Commission, we had a couple items to discuss last month. One of those will be here in the discussion of tiny houses. That will be interesting to see what happens, and also the debate on tiny houses is obviously one that's in our state, one that we got to be looking at, and I think as governments try to posture the proper way to handle it. Beyond that, that's all I can think of for now. Moving on, appointments. I believe we have 2 members to be appointed. One for the Planning Commission, since Mr. Stapleton has recently retired. How long has he been on there, out of curiosity? Mr. Stapleton?
I think this was his 4th year.
Oh, there's one term. Okay. All right, Mr. Reed, this is in your district. You have somebody who has applied, who I know, Mr. Robin Hausner.
I do, after I was in touch with Mark prior to his announcement that he was retiring, so I've been actively looking for someone to fill this position, and I think we found someone really excellent, which is Bob Hausner. He's born and raised in Nelson County, long time, grew up in the area. He's younger than most of the people on the Planning Commission. Kind of in the same way Jesse's a little bit younger than most of the people on this.
Just a little bit.
Yeah,
It's not much.
and he's got great experience. He has a great desire to do this. He's invested long-term in the county. And I think that Mr. Hausner would be a great addition. I'd like to propose that he become the Central District County Commission.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad we called you. I'm glad this is working out. So we have a motion to put Mr. Hausner for the Central District replacement of Mr. Stapleton, and I guess that would be. Now here's my question. He will be finishing Mr. Stapleton's term, and then we have to vote on him again in June?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Got it. So we have a motion. Need a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Parr. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Spivey?
Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Mr. Barton?
Yes.
Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes. Thank you so much. Moving on, Job and Council on Aging, we have another half. Carl Stelwater.
Mr. Stillwater, Base Creek, he does some volunteer work in the county. He's retired. He has experience. Yeah, he's had his CV long. He's been able to serve on the job advisory committee, and he has the he has support in terms of doing that.
So we have a motion to put Mr. Stelwag onto the Java. Which one was it? Java. Board. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr.
Just to note, it's advisory committee.
Advisor. Okay. Motion and second. Hearing none.
Farmer,
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Appointments, is there any other appointments we need to talk about?
We we're time we'll advertise on the website. Keep in mind, if you have anyone to recommend that, Mr. Thorne has resigned, he's no longer in the area.
Keep that advertising going, we'll revisit these applicants. Moving on to correspondence, Barbara? No. No correspondence, Harvey. None as well. Moving on to practice. Martin? Harvey? Mr. Reed? I think our camera walked out because we're about to go into the session. We're going to be going into the session, so. Back. Be prepared to read. We have a motion for the. Motion to be second. We have a second from Mr. Farr. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Bybee?
Mr. Parker. Mr. Farmer.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford.
Yes.